From Louisiana's home team, this is Fox 8 News at 9 p.m.
It survived the test of time for over a century.
Now some say one historic cemetery in New Orleans runs the risk of becoming a public safety hazard. As Shelley Brown explains, while there's been no rest at Oddfellows, one local burial ground could soon get revived.
When people die in New Orleans, many are laid to rest at the foot of Canal Street. The intersection at City Park Avenue, a neighborhood of cemeteries.
It was relatively high ground for the time, and that's the reason the cemeteries are located where they are.
This corner's home to one of 5 cemeteries in the city on the National Register for Historic Places.
It's the only cemetery in the city you can drive by and not really know what's in there. And it creates an interest because of its mystery.
Large white walls on 2 sides hide what is Oddfellows Rest, a smaller private cemetery the Independent Order of Oddfellows, an international fraternal organization built way back in 1849.
It's built originally for the Oddfellows members, the members of the organization as they deceased, and for their families, of course.
But Michael Duplantier, who's researched the cemetery, says burials expanded beyond that at the height of the yellow fever epidemic.
I mean, literally hundreds of people were dying daily.
Some of them buried in vaults that on the inside make up those large walls blocking the public's view.
And it's disrespectful to the people who are buried here to let it get this bad.
Angie Green with Save Our Cemeteries, a nonprofit that works to preserve and protect historic cemeteries, points out the condition of the 164-year-old cemetery. It's defied Mother Nature, including more than a century of hurricanes, yet broken faceplates exist throughout. In some cases, they're missing altogether. We found an exposed vault holding a small cast iron casket, possibly a child's casket, among what appears to be human remains.
This cemetery has had a lot of vandalism in the past, and once you start opening a tomb, it allows water infiltration, and just like any house, that's terribly damaging, so the tomb will decay much faster, and you'll see a lot of vegetation growth, like trees and shrubs growing out of the tops of tombs.
Green says individual families are responsible for the tombs, but the Oddfellows Grand Lodge of Louisiana, the cemetery owner, according to the Secretary of State, is liable for overall maintenance. Problem is, there's not many Louisiana Oddfellows left, at least not in this part of the state. Duplantier says that's been the case for too long.
So this is a cemetery that's been stressed for about 100 years.
Now there's concern over the integrity of one of those 2 wall vaults.
But right now there are fully grown trees growing off the top of the tombs, and they're threatening to collapse into City Park Avenue. And I worry about people walking on the sidewalk there.
And this right here, this looks like it's gonna fall in. So, but a lot of people get off the streetcar and come this way, students, and I go to work at Delgado.
Right.
So sooner or later it's gonna cave in.
On the Canal Street side, the adjacent Herb Import Company shares the cemetery's address. Property the GM says they lease from the Oddfellows. Oddfellows Rest is the only cemetery in the city that has rental income, but that may only be enough to cover minor maintenance, things like grass cutting. Not the kind of money Save Our Cemetery says it would cost to shore up these walls that are in serious jeopardy.
Just taking care of the wall vaults alone, none of the tombs inside the cemeteries, you're looking at more than $2.5 million.
Save Our Cemeteries doesn't have the resources to restore the place, but it wants to lend a hand in the ongoing maintenance.
Legally, Save Our Cemeteries isn't allowed to do work in the cemetery without their permission, and we want to bring volunteers in here to do work. So we're using the Attorney General as a way to contact them.
Even after getting the state's top prosecutor involved, the nonprofit never could track down an Oddfellow in the Louisiana leadership. That is, until now.
Yeah, and this kind of stuff, see, this is what's difficult. And I until I am able to talk to the local people, I don't know how many records exist.
While our Fox 8 crew gathered video in the cemetery, we ran into John and Joy Peterson. John happens to be a past Oddfellows Sovereign Grand Master, essentially a former president of the entire global organization which provides aid in 28 countries.
I have been sent here on a mission by the international organization to assist the chapters here in Louisiana to see what we can do to get this restored and back in good condition.
The Petersons drove to New Orleans from out of state and say they were shocked at what they found inside these walls.
I was not happy with the condition of the entire cemetery.
They explained what's happened here is not a good representation of the Oddfellows and all the good they do.
Our motto is to bury the dead, educate the orphan, take care of the widow.
While many of their cemeteries around the country were turned over to communities, the Oddfellows shifted their focus to support many charities. Still, this forgotten fraternity in New Orleans wants to resurrect Oddfellows Rest. Fox 8 put the Oddfellows in touch with Save Our Cemeteries.
This is so serendipitous.
The next day, the Louisiana Grand Secretary drove to New Orleans from New Iberia for an impromptu meeting.
Well, we formulated a plan basically to hire some construction type people to come in and do some restoration work on a lot of the vaults and whatnot where there's been some damage done.
Save Our Cemeteries agreed to bring in volunteers to clean up all the vegetation and track down and preserve records of who owns which plots. As for the wall vaults,
and we're going to have some of them have some tree people come and look at removing some trees on the inside that are doing damage to those vaults. We might not be able to completely replace it or anything, but of course stop it from falling or deteriorating.
Louisiana Grand Secretary Raymond Buteau Sr. says with the help of their tenant, the Herb Import Company, the Oddfellows have a bright future in NOLA.
Signed up about 15 of them.
Yeah, we are just in the process of starting a new local lodge here, so they will be adopting this cemetery as their project.
Oddfellows Rest, they promise within weeks, will get the TLC it needs and deserves.
It shows the entire spectrum of the history of the city from about 1850 through the present to some extent. And that's important. It's important. Cemeteries tell a lot of stories.
Shelley Brown, Fox 8 News.
If you'd like to lend a hand and volunteer to clean up Oddfellows Rest, they're planning to start the cleanup next Saturday, June 1st. For more information, log on our website, fox8live.com, and click on the links section.